Well, I had actually started this book before the pandemic because I developed this very unhealthy obsession with my neighborhood next door board. And I just got totally kind of interested in how on this virtual sphere you saw both the best and the worst of humanity, and how people, who were for the most part not anonymous, I mean, you could see their names, would say the most outrageous things, online to people who lived right around them, I mean, within spitting distance of their neighbors. And they were saying these crazy things, but then also these like real acts of kindness and neighborliness and community. So I was just really interested in that kind of, juxtaposition. And then COVID happened and, we went into quarantine.
Which I have to say, today is the 3-year anniversary. We're recording this on St. Patrick's Day. So that this is like the 3-year anniversary of lockdown, right?
Wow. I'm in Washington State, which was, if you remember, ground zero for COVID.
Right.
So we went under earlier than I think a lot of the country. And because our schools closed kind of the end of February. And I remember thinking, oh my God, the schools are going to close for 2 weeks. What am I going to do with my kids? And then, 2 years later. So at the very beginning, I couldn't write a word. It just seemed like the world was potentially ending. And I had 3 children to usher through remote schooling and not having nervous breakdowns, and myself not having a nervous breakdown. And writing fiction seemed distinctly just superfluous. It just seemed like a silly diversion from the real world things that were happening. So I didn't write for about, 3 or 4 months. And then I realized that I really needed it for myself. And I really wanted to write something funny. I wanted to sort of start laughing and smiling again. And I couldn't really do that watching the news or, looking at the state of the world. So I decided to create a fictional world and a story that would make me giggle during the day as I was writing.
And I mean, you say you wanted to giggle and you wanted to kind of have some fun and you needed to do this for yourself. The word community is in the title of your novel. Mm-hmm. And this feels very much like, from a pandemic perspective, like an attempt to create your own like sense of community or experience of community through Darcy Clipper and this cast of characters in Murbridge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I get that. I mean, right. We were all sort of cocooned in our houses, and while children and family is great, it has its limitations. Right?
Yeah.
At some point you want to get out and do stuff.
Yeah. You need a little more diversity than the people who are related to you by blood. Yeah. And also I realized that sort of the virtual community that existed both on these apps and also, I had never heard of Zoom before. Who used Zoom before COVID? But these virtual ties increased in importance because we were having no face-to-face interactions. The like little community on my next door board became that much more vital to my sort of mental health and I think a lot of people's mental health. I mean, that's where we were finding our community was online.
Let's talk about the Nextdoor app. I think I have the same thing. Does it have a green logo?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, originally the book was supposed to be green. I was lobbying hard for green, but I got outvoted.
So I think that this app, I mean, these kinds of, there's also what's the other one? Oh my God.
They're all, yeah.
I forget. I'm totally blanking. A friend of mine actually used to work for them. And it's like where you post stuff. I mean, in LA, I feel like it's like, why are there helicopters over our neighborhood?
Yeah.
Like, who got shot?
Totally. Oh no, that's my neighborhood. Did anybody hear gunshots? Did anybody hear, was that gunshots?
Yeah. It's like the
police
have been
setting off some 4th of July Fireworks.
So there's that. And I have to say, I have a limited capacity because like things get so tedious. Like somebody will say, and your book speaks to this in a very funny way. Somebody will be like, there was a black man walking down the street with his hood on, like, and it's like, then someone will be like, hey, racist. And then they'll get into a fight and you're just like, oh my God.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's depressing,
Yeah, it is. This is what I mean by the worst of humanity and the best of humanity. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of prejudices that come out. A lot of racism comes out on these just kind of, and things that, people will be like, I'm just describing what the person looked like, they'll couch it and all these sorts of sort of disclaimers. But at bottom, it'll be a very offensive statement.
Or the opposite will happen, where it'll be like they legitimately saw some guy like break into a car and they're trying to describe him so that people know who's the guy who's breaking into cars, and somebody will be like, why does it matter? And it'd be like, well, I'm just describing. So it's like, it's just a lot of like online-ness when you're dealing in these neighborhood apps. But like you said, sometimes it'll be like, hey, I'm 86 years old and I have trouble getting around. Could anybody possibly bring me some groceries? And people will like flock to do it. And that's lovely.
Yeah, it is.
You see that too.
Yeah. I mean, during the pandemic, one of my neighbors' son was turning 5, and it was very early on in the pandemic. And, he couldn't have a birthday party. He couldn't have friends over. He couldn't go to the pool or go to the, arcade or anything. So, my neighbor put a little notice up that they were having a birthday party outside, and they handed out sparklers, and the entire street came out with their sparklers, and we kept our distance, but for this little boy's birthday. And half of those people I had never met before, but we were all out there singing happy birthday for her son. And it was very sweet and lovely. And that sense of community, certainly on my little block here in Seattle, has maintained since COVID started. We've kind of maintained that sense of cohesion, which is really nice. It's nice to know your neighbors.
Well, yeah, it's nice to know that there's good people around you.
Yeah,
people who like actually care about one another and just care about people in general. And I'm now recalling, I guess it was my wife's birthday. Maybe that's what it was. But like, long story short, for a time during lockdown, we had my son's aide. He's disabled. So we had my son's aide from school living with us.
Oh, wow.
Because literally on this day, 3 years ago, it was like, you're either going to lose your job or you have to like move in with us because we can't have you going back and forth, because he's also immunocompromised. So it's like all this stuff.
Yeah.
So she moved in with us. She's like a hippie from Vermont. And she has, of course, musician friends. Like that's all she has. It's just people who can like play the ukulele and stuff. But she had this friend who is a wonderful musician, plays the guitar, can sing like an angel. And on my wife's birthday, we like planned it out, and she brought her amp and stood in our front lawn, this like wireless amp, and like played a concert for her. And like everybody came out of their houses on our street because they could hear it. Mm-hmm. And it turned into this like lovely moment that otherwise, like without the pandemic would almost certainly not have happened.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
There were good moments.
There were some good moments. There were. And that's, I mean, in the book, Darcy experiences both the good and the bad of her community. And I mean, at the beginning, she really is shunning people and she doesn't want to see anyone. And so, I mean, I was really even though the book takes place in 2019, I was trying to recreate kind of the emotional and mental and physical, situation that I was going through and my friends were going through for Darcy, after her disastrous marital breakdown.
Right. So let's set this up for people.
Okay.
Darcy Clipper is the heroine of Community Board.
Yes, the hapless heroine.
The hapless heroine. And she, at the very beginning of the novel, experiences a rupture in her life with her husband, Skip.
Mm-hmm.
like taking off with his skydiving instructor, Bianca.
Mm-hmm.
And so she is reeling from this, and she moves to the town of Murbridge, Mass, in Western Mass, which I think is where you're from, right?
Yes.
And she goes to her parents' house. Is it okay that I'm doing this? Maybe you should do this. She goes to her
Take it
parents' house.
away.
I'll hand it off to you. I'll hand it off to you.
She goes to her, back to her childhood home, which she remembers as like this place of warmth and comfort and love. And she's an only child. She has a very close relationship with both her parents. And she's a little bit, shall we say, coddled, spoiled. She hasn't really truly broken free, like really become fully independent yet, even though she's 29 years old. And she returns home to kind of, have her back scratched and eat some homemade muffins, and mend her broken heart. But she walks into her house and discovers that her parents have left. They've moved to Arizona and neglected to tell her about it. So that is why she is then plunged into this sort of spiral of despair, and she stays in her house by herself and is so angry at her parents that she doesn't want to talk to them.
Let's
And
let's talk a little bit about Darcy's regimen during this self-imposed period of isolation in her childhood home. She's eating canned food.
Yeah, that her mother had kept in case of some apocalyptic event, such as
I think it was Y2K.
It started with Y2K, yes. But as my editor pointed out to me, she was like, wait a second, they would be dead from botulism. Darcy would die from botulism if she was eating canned food that had been sitting there since Y2K. So there is kind of a revolve, like her mother is also replenishing the supplies because she has fears of some kind of, disaster event.
It is
necessitating
funny.
Some canned food.
Yeah, well, there's an epistolary exchange that recurs throughout the novel between Darcy and her parents, and her mom in particular. It's funny. It's so spot on. Like her mother, I believe, is like warning her about email scams.
Yeah,
it's just the sort of stuff that my parents do.
Sticking
my dad...
your hand down the garbage disposal. Whatever you do, Darcy.
Yeah, my dad will like email my sisters and I, and he'll be like, whatever you do, if somebody emails you asking you for your social security number.
It's sad. Yeah.
Very, very sweet. But, so Darcy is reeling, and something that it makes me think about, and not only the situation that she's in, but the situation that we were in real life that we were talking about just a moment ago with the pandemic and with the neighborhood app. And with this impulse to isolate, especially in a time of crisis and like emotional trauma and just deep, difficult life stuff, is this question of like whether or not people are worth it. I feel like that's really down deep at the heart of this book, and it's been on my mind a lot. I think it's on maybe everybody's mind at a lot or at turns, but people are tough.
People are tough. Yeah.
Like if you're going to get involved in your community, or if you're going to nurture friendships and family relationships, and you're going to kind of be in the mix, you have to come to terms with that, I think.
Yeah.
It's never a smooth ride. Maybe it is for some people. Do you have any friends who have managed to do it that way?
Gosh, not at this point. I mean, maybe ask my 16-year-old, although she would say no as well. Yeah, I mean, people are hard, and maintaining relationships are a lot of work, no matter how great that relationship is, be it a friend relationship, family, romantic. To really maintain a relationship is work. And I think Darcy, I mean, that's the question that she asks herself, because she cuts herself off from her friends. She cuts herself off from her parents. She, is writing draft emails to her soon to be ex-husband, but she never sends them. She's really, decided that she is just going to live by herself for as long as it takes, and she doesn't need anyone else. And, that's also not really an option, which she learns, and which I think we all know deep down. And I mean, all these studies, my parents are getting older, and all of these studies about sort of what leads to longevity and high quality of life in your older years, it's all about community and maintaining, quality relationships. But what's interesting is that I read this thing not that long ago that was talking about sort of the kinds of relationships that lead to this sense of well-being and this longevity. And they were saying like it doesn't really matter if it's your best friend or if it's the barista at the coffee shop that you see every day and say hi to, or your mailman who's like, delivering your mail and you stop and chat. Like that kind of everyday, interactions of kindness, that just basic sense of community really has an impact on mental health and physical health, which I think is really interesting. And so it is worth it if you want to live an extra, 5 to 10 years. Talk to your barista.
No, this is what I find interesting though, is that there's this element of self-interest involved.
Oh yeah, I guess that's true. There is.
It's like I'm extending myself towards you, not because I actually want to know you, but because I want to live longer.
I guess, yeah, you could. Yeah.
But I still think it's worth doing. And a question that I have for you on a personal level is, are you good at this? Are you somebody who's good at like making and keeping friends? Do you struggle with it? Like, where are you on that spectrum?
I have a lot of friends from sort of every period of my life, and I've moved around a fair amount. I've lived in a lot of different places, and sort of each kind of period of my life, I have like a core group that I stay in touch with and who are very, very important to me. I have a group of friends. We go away every year for a weekend. We've lived all over the country, all over the world, but every year for the past 22 years, we go away for a long weekend, the five of us, just the five of us, no partners, no kids, nobody else. And we've done it through marriages, divorces, pregnancies, breastfeeding. And that is like, so I would say that, yeah, I do really prioritize, those relationships. And I think, I mean, I don't know what that says about me. Maybe I'm just very needy.
Well, listen, this sounds, and I don't mean to be, I don't want to over gender things, but this sounds female to me.
I mean, there is a lot of, there are all the studies that say that men, especially once they get married, it's like they cut off ties. They're just about the family, and they don't maintain the friendships in the same way that women do.
Right. And
I don't know. Do you think that's true?
Well, okay. I'm going to turn this around and consult you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just had an exchange. I'll give you an exchange that I feel like is emblematic of guy relationships in general.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of these things that has puzzled me for a long time. Good friend of mine from college. We go back. We had great times together. Like kindred spirits, both creative souls, but not in like great communication post-college. I mean, maybe for a period. That sort of faded once we got married. And you don't have to do the way that it does. You get married, you have kids, things get, you communicate less, you see each other less.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, we will text. And just the other day, he texted me like an old Christmas card that I had sent, which like included like a piece of creative writing that is like pretty cringe. I feel like embarrassed about it, but I was young. I meant well. And I texted him and I was like, whoa, like blast from the past. And I was like, hey, I want to, and this exchange could happen. Like it could have happened 3 years ago, 5. It's happened many times. And I'll say, hey, I'm going to call you. I want to hear how you're doing. Because I genuinely do want to be friends. I'm sort of a dog personality. Like if you come at me with a text, I'll be like, hey, let's talk. How you doing? Like, and I called him and I left a voicemail. Never heard from him. This has happened like 10 times.
I'm
since
sorry.
Like, yeah. And I'm like, and I know he's still my friend. I don't doubt.
Yeah.
But I just don't think he can do the phone. I think he's, you know, I think maybe it's pot. He's a stoner. Maybe it's just too much. I don't know what it is.
It is funny how phone calls now are sort of an order above in intimacy. You know, texting, emails, phone is like, my kids are like, Mom, don't call them.
Listen, I want
Don't
to lead.
call.
I want to lead a counter revolution back towards phone calls. Like, what
Yeah.
happened to picking up the phone and having a call with somebody and talking to them as a human being?
Yeah.
It's crazy that it's like, no, I mean,
Yeah.
texting, if you go beyond texting, it's like a faux pas. And I think,
Uh-huh.
so I feel like a weird loser because my own good friend is like, no,
Oh my God, not him again. I
I
don't
mean,
want,
yeah,
I'm not
I
going
mean,
to answer that text or that phone message. I mean, I'm also a talker. I like to get on the phone and talk. And so if you need to, you can call me.
better watch out. I mean,
um
I'm just a person who I think, as writers, I think we do have an introverted streak, whether we're good with people or not. Like some people are just totally introverted, and that's not me. I don't think that's you.
I'm
Just
not
from
totally introverted, but I do think, I mean, there's one thing with maintaining friendships and kind of talking on the phone one on one, doing, for example, book promotion and going to big events and smiling for 5 hours straight. And, I mean, that and having to talk to big groups of people. And that's sort of another magnitude of, of extroverted that I still find difficult. Like after I do those sorts of things, I need to go and like lay down for like 2 days.
yeah, I cannot stand. I mean, I can stand doing a reading, but I really don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd much rather do this. I would do a podcast interview where you're talking with somebody, but to stand up and read from my book and like you're worried about, is anybody going to show up? And
I
then
know.
you you open it up to questions, like everyone's just sitting.
Nobody has, yeah.
Just forget it. Nobody wants to be there. It's just like, except like maybe like your parents or I don't know.
Yeah.
It just seems like.
Well, my launch is coming March 28th. Elliott Bay Books.
I guess you got to do it. You got to do it.
Yeah, you got to do it. And I mean, and I consider myself, this is my, I used to be a lawyer. Like I never thought that I could get published. Like I never thought that I would be in this position. So I do feel very grateful and lucky that I get to, write books and people read them and people will buy them at Elliott Bay and I get to go and talk about it. So there's, it is kind of it's a double-edged situation.
It's a high class problem, as they say.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
To have to go like read to your adoring fans.
Or at least the people who all owe me favors.
Yeah, exactly.
Who I've strong-armed into coming.
That's right.
Or guilt-tripped, yeah.
You got to cash those favors. You got to use the neighborhood app. Just put it up there. I'm going to be at Elliott Bay.
Come on down.
Let's talk about Western Mass.
Okay.
Because like Europe, you don't live there. You, like you said, you've lived all over, but you're writing like back in the direction of your roots.
Yeah.
So like why and what's the experience like? And like, I guess of all places to want to sort of build your imaginary community, why there?
Well, I think your hometown just gets baked into your DNA in a way that no other place does, or at least it certainly has for me. And, I left when I was 18. I grew up in a small town called Stockbridge in the Berkshires in Western Mass. And I knew fairly early on that I did not want to remain in a small town in Western Mass. But all three of my books have a tie to the Northeast, and I have not lived in the Northeast since I went to law school in New York. So I did live in New York for a while. But I don't know, when I particularly with this book, because I was sitting in my house, I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't do any research. I naturally gravitated to the place that I felt the most confident about describing, and the place that felt most comfortable to me. And that was a little town in Western Mass. And
Can I ask,
my
can I ask
mom
you a
still
question?
lives in the area. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to ask a question because you said you left when you were 18, but your
Mm.
mom still lives there, so you would return to visit
Hmm.
frequently.
Yeah. And
Okay.
actually, one of my sisters just moved back to the area after living away for, same as I did. She left when she was about 18, and now she's back with her family.
Well, the reason I
So
ask
it's
is
a nice
because,
place.
well, yeah, the reason I ask is because I left the Midwest when I was 18, but then my parents moved away from the
Hmm.
Midwest, so I never returned.
Yeah.
And I consequently have never written about it because I really can't remember it. I
Yeah.
think you almost need to go back and sort of like drive around your old neighborhood and revisit your old haunts and stuff for it to maybe stay with you.
Yeah, that's probably true. I have been back probably once a year, once every other year since I left. So I have kind of watched it develop and grow and maintain a connection with that area. Um, but the I've often, after the book was kind of done and said, I thought, God, I really should have chosen a name for the town that was more dissimilar than my actual hometown. My hometown is Stockbridge, and I chose Murbridge for I thought a kind of good reason about the mushrooms that grow in the town. But it is very easy to sort of draw parallels between the fictional town, and my actual hometown.
It sounds like on the page, it seems very quaint. I wanted to live there.
It is very quaint. It's a very nice place.
Yeah, I have
You
not
know.
spent any time out in Western Mass,
Yeah.
but it seems like kind of remote and nice and
Yeah. It's
lovely. Is
2.5 hours to New York City.
okay.
About
So you
two to Boston.
fond memories, or did you find it like cloistered as a kid? Were you ready to get out?
I was ready to get out. I mean, I had a very boring kind of, you know, uh, isolated childhood, which was fine. I didn't die. I didn't
What do
like.
you mean? What do you mean isolated? Just meaning that you were in a small town and not close to like any.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't, and also, I mean, I definitely felt, I mean, I felt a little bit like a fish out of water. Like I was not in my place, and I knew that very early on living there. Um, which is not to say that it was a perfectly fine, great place to grow up. But I did know that I wanted to leave,
What
and
is your
I did
place?
not want to move back. It's funny. I mean, I really do love Seattle, where I live now. Seattle's changed a lot, though. I've lived here for 13 years, and it has changed a lot in that time. Um, I don't know. I guess my place is more where, I mean, now it's where my kids are, really. My oldest is getting ready to apply to colleges, and I'm um, gonna just follow her, I think, for the
I was
rest of my
gonna
life.
move into
I'm
those
just gonna,
dorms.
yeah.
I've had
Here
that thought.
I am,
Yeah,
honey.
that sounds fun. That actually sounds kind of fun. I'm sure. I mean, for you, maybe not
Yeah,
for your daughter.
no, she would probably murder me. But I don't know. I mean, it's a good question. Like, I mean, I lived in London for 8 years and loved London. I lived in New York for a long time. I lived in Boston. Um, and each one of the places that I've lived, I mean, I definitely enjoyed it and loved it and found good people and good restaurants and good baristas. I don't know. I mean, I might just be kind of a little bit of a roamer around.
I get that. I mean,
Yeah.
I've moved around a lot, and I often have wondered aloud, even on this show, like, where is the place? Am I in the right place? Like, I've lived in Los Angeles 20 something years
Oh,
now,
wow.
and I never like grew up thinking like it's going to be LA. Like, it
Yeah.
feels like accidental almost that I'm here,
Yeah.
and yet my whole life is passing here. And when I start to think about it, it makes me a little bit like creeped out. I'm like, oh my God, like I'm spending like 99% of my human existence like in this city, like in these
Yeah.
you go away every once in a while, but most of my life is passing here.
Well, where would you move if you were to move?
Every time I have the conversation with myself or with someone else, I end up being like, I don't know, like the weather's great here. Family here, friends here. My kids were born here. I like the idea of them having like a home base.
Yeah.
I did not. I mean, I moved around a little bit and kind of lost my first. I was born in Milwaukee, so then we left, and I kind of lost everything. And that's hard,
Mm-hmm.
you sort of have to start all over again. And then you go to college, you lose all that, and then you leave college, you lose all that.
Yeah.
So it's hard to kind of reinvent yourself. I like the idea maybe of just sticking here. And I mean, there's worse places to be, right? I mean,
For sure.
there's a reason why there's 10 million people in
Yeah.
Southern
LA is
California.
great. And
So
you get a lot of
yeah,
sunshine.
I know, which isn't great for I'm a pale, like you're like Western European blend. So it's not the greatest for me, but I'm wearing sunscreen and wearing a hat nowadays. So
There you go.
let's talk about writing funny.
Mm.
Is this something that comes naturally to you? Is this something, because you said earlier, you kind of explicitly were in the mood to try to be funny.
Yeah.
And was this a pivot for you? Were there things that you had to do for this book that you didn't have to do for others? Did you have particular funny friends that you were like vetting your material with? Like, is this funny?
um, I kind of just trusted my gut with it when it was definitely a pivot. I was worried that I couldn't do it. But because it was coming from such a need for me, it almost, I mean, I wouldn't say it was easy to write, but this was by far the easiest book I've written. I mean, granted, this is my third novel. It's not like I have dozens and dozens to compare it to, but I mean, my first book as a first novel is just this utter, obsessive act of faith and love and craziness, because you have no idea if anything is ever going to come of it. And then my second was, I mean, I really felt like I grew so much as a writer. The task that I set myself at the beginning of that book was
which
that
is The Last Romantics.
The Last Romantics, yeah, which is it's a family epic that follows four siblings over about 100 years. And
so easy.
yeah. And so I actually turned that book in 3 times, and twice, the first 2 times, my editor said, Tara, this is not the book that we're going to publish. And I was like, no, this is the book. This is the book I've been working on. And so it took me about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, when I thought it was going to take me 2 or 3. It was very much a emotional, like, there's blood on those pages of that book. And I really learned, I learned so much writing it, and really grew as a writer, writing that book. And then with Community Board, because I had like a very clear project that I wanted to do. I wanted to look at the Nextdoor-esque app and the communications that arise in it. I wanted, once kind of COVID started, I was like, okay, I want to examine these conditions, but I don't want to say the word COVID. I want it to be completely before COVID. So I set it in 2019. It takes place over this one calendar year. And so it was just a much more manageable project. And I don't know, I just kind of found Darcy's voice pretty early on, and I just kind of went with it. And it was just, and if you look at, there's so much material on Nextdoor, or any, there's so much material within any kind of community board, and there is so much material within the human race, like, there's so much silliness and nonsense. I mean, that's the quote from Our Town that's in the epigraph. When you get near the human race, there's layers and layers of nonsense. And so that was sort of my jumping off point, and finding the nonsense wasn't that hard.
Right. I mean, I feel like too with those neighborhood apps, people all like some people anyway, they almost post as if no one's going to read it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like a stunning level of candor sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like you do know that the people who are reading this live, a stone's throw away from you. So, um,
Do you post?
very, very rarely,
Yeah.
but I do lurk.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
a real lurker.
Of course. Yeah.
And it was very funny. As soon as I told, all my friends that I was writing this book about, that was based on a next door app, everyone started sending me like their favorite posts. Cause of course, every single neighborhood has their own, moments of scandal and controversy, and the silly disputes that erupt on these boards. So I was just, yeah, I still, people are still sending me emails with like,
I
oh my God, is it too late? Can you get this one in there?
I feel like some of this, like you make a good point about this being like very neighborhood specific. Like every single town, city,
Yeah.
neighborhood has their own iteration of this. And
Hmm.
in a big city like Seattle or Los Angeles, it's a little bit more anonymous. It's got to be maybe even more tedious when you live in a town where everybody sort of knows each other, right? Like Murbridge, like,
Oh yeah.
so
And yeah. I mean, but mine is for my little neighborhood in Seattle. So like not everybody knows everybody, but a lot of people.
right, right.
um it's definitely not fully anonymous, the postings.
Are you in like Seattle proper, like in those hills and?
I'm in Madrona, which is a little neighborhood. It's about, I don't know, like 15-minute drive to downtown.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty central.
I don't know it that well. I was there for a work trip a few years ago and I tried to like explore. It's beautiful.
It is. It's a great city. It is. I
Uh,
really love it.
well, I want to talk a little. You mentioned earlier that you
Mm,
were a lawyer and you
yeah.
didn't think that this was going to be possible, the life that you're in now and the work that you're doing now. And I know that people listening will hear that and lean in because it's always it's always hard to make your
Yeah.
way as a writer. And I think every path is a little bit different. But I'm interested to hear you talk about how you did it. Like you were working as an attorney, you were living in
Hmm.
London. Like that's a pretty like that's not like a job you can sort of do halfway, right?
No, it's not. Um, yeah. So I started in New York, and then I moved to London, and was doing, excuse me, international arbitration, which is basically dispute resolution, but with, international parties. So I was traveling a lot, and it was very, I really enjoyed kind of the first half of my career as a lawyer. I mean, I was doing mostly writing and research, which is what I love to do. And I mean, just going back even before I became a lawyer, I mean, I was always writing, like writing was for me how I entertained myself. And
Writing fiction.
yeah, yeah, I always had like a story or like a little, and I always kept journals. I loved writing in my journals, and like, I'm a big kind of coffee shop eavesdropper.
Right.
um, and but it seemed like it was not something that I could make a career out of. And when I was in college, getting your MFA, it wasn't the thing that it is today. Like getting your MFA meant that you would basically go be an English high school teacher, which I knew I didn't want to be an English high school teacher. Not that, I mean, that's an amazing career, and I have it's such incredibly fond memories of my high school English teachers, but that wasn't what I wanted to do. So it just saying like I want to be a fiction writer seemed like saying I want to be a rock star or astronaut or something. So but writing was still something that I loved to do and something that I was good at. And so going to law school was almost kind of a I don't know, it was a way to use my writing skills, and it's a great, at least the kind of law that I was doing, if you're curious about people and about how the world works, it was a great, it was very educational and very stimulating intellectually. So I did that for about 7 years. And the last 2 years, I had two kids, very close together. They're 19 months apart. And the good thing about living in London when you're pregnant and when you have babies is that you get a real maternity leave. So I took 9 months off for each of my kids. And during that time, I had always worked. I mean, when, I started working when I was like 16 years old, and my law job was incredibly demanding, and I was working all of these hours and traveling and blah, blah, blah. So, when I went on maternity leave, like after I got over that initial sort of freak out of being a new parent and can I keep this newborn alive? I was like, holy cow, I've got so much time.
They sleep a lot.
They sleep so much.
Right.
So that's when I really started writing seriously, which is, it's so funny because I feel like I have so many conversations with younger women these days about, oh my God, younger writers, women writers about, I'm just so worried about having kids and it's going to take away from my writing time. And I feel like for me, it was just totally switched. Like I didn't really take it seriously until I had kids. And I mean, granted, it was kind of an unusual situation that I had, that I was abroad and I had a real maternity leave, and luckily my kids were healthy and happy and good sleepers and all of that. But I think there was also something about becoming a parent and thinking, what sort of lesson do I want to give this child? Like, what sort of life do I want to show them as a life for them to emulate? And at that point in time, I wasn't loving being a lawyer anyhow. And in the back of my mind, I had always thought, okay, when I retire from my real job, that's when I'll start writing seriously. And I just thought to myself, like, would I tell my kid that? Like wait, like you have this thing that you love to do and you should like wait till the very end of your life to actually do it.
Good job, Mom.
Yeah. So I started The House Girl, my first novel, during those maternity leaves. And then I kind of, it came to a point where, I had sort of half a book done. I had two little kids at home. My husband at the time had taken a leave from his job to kind of be more of a stay-at-home parent. I was back at the law, like working nonstop. And after the time that I had at home with my kids and writing, then like the kind of contrast to going back into the office and getting back onto that treadmill, I was just like, no way, I can't do it.
Yeah.
So I left. So that's when I left the law, and we left London, because if you're not, making a corporate lawyer salary, it's kind of hard to live in a city like London. So, and my family, I have two sisters, and they both at various points have lived in Seattle. And so I'd always been out to Seattle, and my youngest sister still lives here with her family. And so we kind of came out here and we're like, okay, well, I guess we'll stay in Seattle for a little while. And so this is where I became a writer, was in this city. And luckily for me, I mean, I had no idea what an amazing literary town Seattle is. When I moved here, it was pure luck. And I very fairly quickly found a community of writers, and which was incredibly important also. I mean, just going back to the idea of community, I mean, writing, as you know, is such a solitary, isolating kind of profession. And especially when you know nothing about publishing or I had no idea if I was ever going to get my first novel kind of out into the world. And I found a group of people who were in similar situation to me.
So
And
were they published? So unpublished writers? You mean like you were in a community with?
there's a place in Seattle, maybe you've heard of it. It's called the Richard Hugo House.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and they have classes and they have speakers come, and so I started taking classes there, and those were really like my first like honest like real writing classes. And and so it was people that I met there, and just like going there and like hearing other writers. They have like an open mic once a month where people, and that's like where I first read anything, was at the open mic there. And just sort of being around other people who were doing this thing, this trying to become writers, was so important to me. And it just sort of opened my world. It rocked my world. And yeah, so that's kind of, and then I don't know. Do you want me to keep going and
Well,
talk?
I wanna ask you about The Last Romantics,
Mm,
because it's your second book. It's this ambitious undertaking. The scale, like you said, it covers 100 years or something. It's like
hmm
this. It's a big task, and the book gets picked. Like, what was it like Read with Jenna on the Today
Yeah,
Show? Is it the Today Show? It's
the
like one of
Today
these.
Show. Yeah,
So it's one of these books that gets blessed with this
yeah,
amazing, like, publicity. What do you even call it? Like publicity, marketing. Like
yeah,
a book goes on television like that and gets the endorsement of Jenna Hager, and all of a sudden it's a bestseller. I mean, that's
yeah.
a big breakout. So you just, or at least that's the way that I
Oh
observing it.
yeah, it was huge. And that was, my book was actually the first one. It was like her inaugural pick. So at the time, I didn't know. No one really knew what was going to happen or how big it was going to be. But it ended up being, yes, a huge stroke of luck for that book, and brought it to so many more readers than I think would have kind of found it on their own.
So, okay. So for people listening
Mm.
who might be writerly, what is the material impact of something like that happening? Because I think most writers dream of like Oprah picking their book, or Reese Witherspoon, or who are the, and to be honest, it's usually, I feel like women authors tend to benefit from this more, because usually it's women who run the book clubs. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like Oprah, I guess, like, what, she picked Jonathan Franzen and he sort of screwed it up. So
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
maybe
You
that's
can thank Jonathan
right.
for that.
But the question really is like, how did it change your life? Did it change your life?
um, I mean, did it change my life? It did kind of change my life, because it it elevated that book. I mean, I got a 2-book deal with my publisher after that, and I mean, people still talk about that book. I mean, I was just in New York for a Jenna Bush Hager event celebrating 4 years of her book club, and met a lot of the other writers. I mean, there really is a community. I think that I, I don't know how the other book clubs work, but I mean, she is so dedicated to literature and to promoting literacy, and creating community around the book. So, the authors that she's chosen, we all, not every single one of us, but I've met so many of them now, or become friends with them over social media, and it is, yeah, she's wonderful and very, very genuine about her love of reading and her love of these books. So So, I mean, it's so funny because you write a book, right? And like, you have no idea. You really have zero idea as to what is going to come out of, like, if anyone is going to ever pick it up. And the promotion and the marketing and all of that happens so separately. Like, I was not involved in any of that. I was in an airport and I got a phone call. I was like doing some pre-publication events with some booksellers, and I was like running between gates, and my phone rang, and it was my publicist saying, "Oh, Tara, good news. Jenna Bush Hager's chosen you for her book club." And I was like, "Oh, do I have to go to Texas for that? Like, where does she live?" Like, I really thought that it was like going to be her and like her friends, and like we were going to drink some wine and talk about the last romantics. And obviously that, yeah, that was not, it was slightly larger scale than that. But it like, I had nothing to do with that. Like, I wrote a book, and I worked really hard on the book, and I love the book. I'm very proud of it. But I think all of my feelings about the book would be the same whether, it had been picked for Jenna's book club or not.
You went on TV? Like, you had to go on the Today Show?
Well, I went on via Instagram Live, so I did not go on the actual show.
But you were like in conversation on the show via Instagram, or just via,
yeah,
or the book club.
I think it was just on an Instagram Live. Like, I don't think it was on, but she did unveil the book. Like, she opened it, she unwrapped the book. It was so funny because I actually didn't know that they were going to do that. And my dad was like sitting drinking his coffee and like watching the Today Show, and like saw my book. So yeah.
I mean, that's all you need, right?
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
That was pretty awesome. Yeah.
So, okay. So that's amazing. And I think it's like experiences like that. When a book does well, it may be the best material benefit, aside from maybe financial stuff, is the fact that you just get to do another one, right?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like you get to jump to the next lily pad or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that I'm hearing from you as you talk about your career in law, having babies, and continuing to write books. This is your third book. That's always of interest to me. I think so many writers, maybe every writer, struggles to get the work done, and has like a litany of reasons why it can't get done, like obligations. Usually it's work stuff, right? Or the demands of parenthood.
Mm-hmm.
But I read an essay that you wrote for Vogue about going through a divorce,
mm-hmm.
and just the messiness of like the emotional parts of life, whatever it happens to be. Like, I don't know, I have been through, a version of that with like my son's health condition. You're trying to like write through stuff. You're just like, how am I going to find time? And sometimes you just feel like you can't do it. But I think I'm curious to know how you sort of forged your way through. I know there are pauses and there are times when you feel like it's all for naught, but you've managed to keep going. You talk a little bit about how?
Well, I mean, for me, and this goes back to me as a, 13-year-old scribbling in my journal. I mean, writing for me has always been a real outlet, like a cathartic experience personally, before it ever became something that I did publicly. And I still think of it that way. It's something that I do, that I have to do. Like, even if, as my dad, who the same dad who saw me my book on the Today Show, is always like, "Tara, you can always go back to the law."
I like how you
NYU is a very good school.
I like how you call it the law. It almost sounds like it almost sounds like you're a cop or something, but
no. He likes that I have like a backup plan in case this whole writing thing doesn't work out. But I mean, I would still be doing it. Like, I'll be doing it, like, I mean, I'm at the age now where people are, my friends are like talking about, well, retirement and where are you going to retire and what, and And I mean, I'm never going to retire. I will be writing until the day I die, hopefully, fingers crossed. Um, and it is just part of how I process the world and how I process my own emotions. And if I go a period of time without writing, I just start to feel kind of like itchy, you know? It's like
Grumpy.
not working out or not like, you know, you just get kind of that. Yeah, I get grumpy.
I do too. I think most of us do. I think most of us do. But
Yeah.
there are also these times where life kind of intrudes,
Oh yeah, for sure.
and maybe
Yeah.
you don't have, like, the last thing you want to do is write, or maybe you do want to write, but you can't.
Yeah.
And then you have to sort of wait for it to return. I guess maybe the lesson is that if you hold out, it will return.
Yeah, it will return. And I think also one thing that I do that is so helpful is I just get out of my house. Like I'm actually next week, I'm going with some friends. A friend has kind of a Airbnb house that they rent out, and we're going with three other writers for the week to just kind of hang out there and just write, and like getting out of my house and away from laundry and away from all of the myriad, you know, day-to-day stuff that you have to do, which does, you know, your life is busy. Everyone's life is busy, and it is easy to you know, to prioritize those things above the writing, because the writing is hard, you know, and like emptying the dishwasher is a pain, but it's really not that hard.
Right.
So it's
Right.
like it's easier to do those things. But I feel like if I remove myself from my environment and just go someplace else and say, I am writing for these 3 days or however much time you've got, that for me is incredibly helpful and productive.
Even if you're in a house with like 6 other writers, this sounds like a
Mhm.
lot. There sounds like a lot of, I feel like wine will be
I'm
consumed.
sure we will be drinking a fair amount of wine, yes.
But you'll all get up in this house and you will set about to work on your books together.
Yeah, yeah. We're all writers, and uh one is working on a novel, another is working on a book proposal. Actually, two there are three of us working on novels and one is working on a book proposal. So, yeah,
Get out of So the answer is to get out of your house.
get out of your house. And I think also having a routine. I mean, it's something that a lot of people that I know, a lot of writers that I know are very conscientious about sort of their routines. And I am sometimes, but then, you know, like usually I work first thing in the morning and I set my alarm for 5 a.m. and I get up and I do, you know, a couple hours
5
before.
a.m.
Yeah.
Look at you. That's
I also
no.
like to nap, so I usually take a nap in the middle
Okay.
of the day.
But
But I just find that like there's something about that time when like everything is quiet and you've just woken up, like your dreams are maybe still swirling around, um and I find that I often do my best work. I'm the most productive at that time. Um but then, like, you know, this morning I set my alarm and I pressed snooze a few too many times, and then I like woke up and I had to get my daughter out, and I, you know, sometimes, you know, best laid plans, the routine doesn't always happen, but
sure.
I think it is good to have a routine. And also, I mean, when I was working on the sort of the last iteration of The Last Romantics, I really did try to treat it like my day job. You know, it was, that's when my kids were younger. So they were, you know, they were much more trouble. They
Right.
were a lot. Now I have to like get them out of bed, but then they were waking me up at 5 a.m. Um, but I really did try to be like, okay, this is my day job. Like in the hours and when my kids are at school, like this is what I'm doing. And
It's all good.
um but I think whatever kind of mind games you have to play with yourself to get your butt in the chair on a regular basis, like figure it out, you know, like we've all got other stuff to do, and you just, yeah, figure out something that works for you. If it's setting your alarm early or getting out of your house or making sure keeping to a routine, you know, just do it.
or all of the above.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate the insights. I congratulate you on community board. I'm glad we're getting
Thank
to
you.
spotlight it in the book
Yes,
club.
thank you for choosing it for your book club. I have not
I know I'm not
expressed
Jenna
my
Hager.
gratitude.
I know I'm not Jenna Hager. I realize that I don't have quite the platform, but like, nevertheless, it is delightful to meet you, and I wish you well. Are you working on another book, or are you in a holding pattern?
I am. I'm working. I've actually got two kind of in the mix right now. Both of them are very different. One is a murder mystery. I have a fondness for a good thriller, and so this is kind of a thriller. And then the other one is an idea that I've been kicking around for a long time. About it's kind of a dystopian novel set in the Pacific Northwest. It's actually the first time that I'm taking from this part of the country. And it's about sort of this isolated community on an island, and I can't really say any more about it because I haven't figured it out yet.
Let me ask one question.
Yeah.
You talk about these two projects.
Yeah.
Are you going to write both of them? Or is it like, are you in a pattern right now where you're trying to decide which one's going to win out?
No, I'll write both of them. Okay. I've the thriller, I'm far enough along that I know what's going to happen, and I've got it fleshed out enough. And then the other one, it's one of those ideas that like I keep coming back to, like it's been in my brain for long enough that I know I need to flesh it out, and I need to really write it. And I kind of circle back to it every couple of months and like have some ideas. But that is definitely that's more of a Last Romantics kind of time frame, I think.
Okay. All right. Well, I wish you well.
Thank you.
All of the above. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to talk to me. I really enjoyed it.
This was great. Thanks so much.